Hi everybody, welcome to All Games New and Old. I am David Rodriguez, and today we're going to be reviewing Arkham Horror The Card Game. Now, this was published in 2016 by Fantasy Flight Games and was designed by Nate French and MJ Newman. So since this is a game that's based in the Cthulhu mythos, I reached out to my expert on the great old ones, Malefor Darkstar. What's going on, Malefor? Yes, so you play as investigators in the 1920s, and you're trying to investigate some sort of cosmic horror or maybe regular horror. I'm a little distracted. What are these things? Those are peeps. Ah! We just celebrated Easter. I wonder what the great old one, Easter Banyathlotep, has left us. What unknowable power might lie within these strange blobs? Pretty sure it's marshmallow. Perhaps I can take their power into myself. You're gonna get a stomach ache. Gross. Well, I'm sufficiently horrified to talk about a game set in the Cthulhu mythos, so let's go to our gameplay overview. Okay, so for the gameplay overview of Arkham Horror The Card Game, most everything you use is, surprise, surprise, cards. So from the deck that you have for your specific investigator to the event deck where almost everything bad happens.
There's also the agenda deck and the act deck. The agenda deck will progress, gain Doom tokens on it, and it gets a new Doom token each round. And the act deck progresses based off of getting clue tokens. And that's, or achieving certain things that it wants you to achieve. And the clue tokens you can get at the different locations and by investigating, or there's some characters that can get them in other ways. Yeah. And the Doom tokens, you're gonna get one of those basically at the end of the beginning. I've ever read it all kind of as a blur to me, but basically every round you're going to get another Doom token on there. So there's sort of a timer on each scenario you go through, and when you get to a certain number on either of those, it's going to go to the next card, which is going to progress the story. And usually if it's the agenda one, that means bad things are happening, and generally when you get to the end of either, that means you've either been successful or not. There's also some villain cards, I think it's mostly cultists, that can also collect Doom tokens that count towards that turning point as well. Right. So on your turn, during the investigator's turn, you've got several things you can do. You can draw a card or gain a resource, and resources is what you're going to be using to play cards out. Almost every card has a cost at the top that you'll have to pay in resources to play those out in front of you. Some will stay out in your active area that you can use sometimes a certain number of times, or you can use throughout the game. So like weapons, for instance, they'll stay out in front of you, so you can use them during the rest of the scenario. There's also event cards that you can play, and usually those will have a one-time effect on the game. Some of the event cards are also have a special keyword called fast. And so when you use a fast card, it doesn't actually account against one of your actions. So it's a nice, you still have to pay the resource cost for it though. Yep. Some cards will have a action on there that you can perform, and that'll take up one of your actions as well. You can also use actions to move from location to location. Every scenario is going to have a number of locations. You can tell which locations are connected to which based on symbols on their cards. Some of the scenarios will have like a diagram of how they recommend you set out those locations to help make it a little less confusing as far as where to go, because otherwise you could glance down at something and think you can move from one place to another, but you really can't. You can also do an investigate action, which is how you're going to get those glue tokens off of the area that you're at, which is going to
involve a skill test, which I'll get to in a second. You could also fight or engage an enemy. So if you go to a spot and an enemy is engaged with somebody else, or if it's just not engaging you for whatever reason, you could choose to engage it. In that case, it goes to your area and you're now basically locked in sort of a combat with it. And then if you choose to fight, of course, you're going to be doing damage to that creature, or trying to anyway. And that's going to involve a test as well. When you have to do a skill test because you're in a fight or investigating, you're going to be looking at the attribute on your card that kind of matches what you're doing. So if you're fighting, there's like a fist attribute. Evading has like a little like winged foot.
Agility.
Icon. Yeah, agility on there. And you're going to be looking at a number that you have to beat. So every monster will have a number you have to beat. To investigate in certain locations, there's a number you have to beat. But it's not a matter of simply just having that number on your character card. You can also play cards out of your hand that match the attribute that you need to use that can help boost that attribute for a certain check. But then you also have to draw a token out of the chaos bag, and some of those will be positive and many of them will be negative. Each scenario has some special ones that will do different things depending on the scenario you're in, but that adds a little bit of randomness and a little bit of uncertainty to any check that you do. Another thing you can do is if you're engaged with enemies, you can choose to evade them. And if you're successful, you exhaust that enemy, turn them sideways, and they'll be basically inactive until you get to the next round, which is kind of a nice way to deal with it if you're up against something that you can't possibly handle. So as you play this game, for the most part, they have it set up in lots of separate campaigns. So you can take your character and go from one scenario in a campaign to the next, until you eventually get to the end. You can usually move on, even if you lose a given scenario, but of course it makes it a little tougher for you if that's the case. And you can use the decks that they have as pre-made decks right there in the box. But if you want to customize your character and have a little better chance probably against some of the scenarios, you can also build your own deck.
Yeah, and you build your own deck. Each character card on the back of it, it kind of gives you a little breakdown of what you can get for building your deck. Each character has one personal card, one personal weakness. You'll draw a random weakness, and then you add 30 additional cards. And each character has 2 specialty decks that you can choose from. The cards also have different levels to them. There will be like a little star in the upper corner around the cost of the card. And that represents the level. So there's one class that you'll be able to get 0 to level 5. The other one's normally 0 to level 2. And then there's some neutral deck cards as well that you can use to build your 30 card deck. You're only limited to 2 of the same type of cards. So, like, for example, Lucky Rabbit Split is a card that you could get, but you can only have 2 of those in your deck. Another thing to keep in mind when you're building your deck is stuff like allies. You can only have 1 ally out at a time. So you don't want to go super heavy in allies when building your deck because you won't be able to really get through all of them. Same with weapons. Like, you can only have some weapons are one-handed, some weapons are two-handed. You only have 2 hands, so you can't put out more weapons than what you can handle. So something to keep in mind when you're building your deck. So if you're familiar with any of the artwork for any of the Arkham Horror games from Fantasy Flight games, you'll recognize the artwork. They changed it up a little bit. Like, the character Wendy Adams looks a little bit younger than she normally does in a lot of the other games. But it's all similar feel. It's all very Lovecraft, noir, fantasy.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the quality art is really fantastic. It can look pretty realistic while also looking really creepy. Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, it's like this. It's beautiful and horrific at the same time. It is not very kid-friendly art, I'm going to say. There's creatures that definitely look like they just bit into a human or something, but probably human. Yeah. So, yeah, it's not a game that you want to be playing with children, even if they could understand it. It's pretty violent as far as the art goes. How did you feel about like the representation and inclusivity in this game?
They did a good job with the women not being over sexualized. But the base game could definitely do better with the diversity. There's 5 playable characters. I think the 3 of them are women, including Wendy, so a kid. But they're all white. So I know that the expansions have some more diversity in ethnicities. But it would have been nice if they include that in the base set as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think they have so many characters in their Arkham mythos now, and I realized this originally came out in 2016, and they were trying not to change the cards in there, but it would have been kind of cool if, even back then, if they had some of their characters who were not, just white folks in there, because I know in the broader range of it, they've got quite a lot more diversity in terms of ethnicity and even gender. So it would have been cool if they included in this, but it's at least out there. So I don't think that they're completely not mindful of it, which I definitely appreciate. So when it comes to components, there's not really a ton to say. It's mostly cards, and I think they're good quality cards. The tokens are a nice thick cardboard. We did get like kind of coin holders for our chaos tokens, which aren't strictly necessary. I do like the way they feel. They're pretty nice, but you don't desperately need them. I think they're good quality enough that you wouldn't have to worry about too much. It does come with a cloth bag that seems to be pretty decent quality as well. I don't notice any threads coming out when I pull things out of there or anything like that. So, really no complaints about the quality of the components at all.
Yeah, I agree. I like the components of this. I actually like the character cards. They're a little bit smaller and they're double-sided, so when your turn's over, you can flip it over. Since you don't go in a specific turn order, it's really easy to get confused of who's done what, who's taken their turns, especially if you have a higher player count. So I like that they have thought of that and made it so it's easy for you to be like, okay, yeah, everybody's done.
Yeah, one thing to note is we are playing with the revised core set that just came out fairly recently. So it does have, there's not different cards in there, but it has more of some cards, so it's easier for multiple people to build their decks out of it. But there have been cases of people having some printing issues on some of those cards. We have one that's just slightly off. It's like one of the main character cards. It's like that picture's just like a little bit like slightly tilted. It's still totally usable as it is, but like part of his name, I think, is cut off a little bit. But I have heard stories of people having bigger problems than that. And because Fantasy Flight is owned by Asmodee, the biggest game company in the world, cannot replace parts for you like the smaller game companies can for some reason. Anyway, so I would definitely, when you get the set, just make sure you look over and make sure all the cards look like they're printed okay. That way, if you need to get it taken care of through the place that you bought them, you can. Again, pretty minor, at least in our set. I wouldn't even probably bother trying to return that, to be honest with you. But it's something to look out for. You don't want to get all the way through it or have the game sitting around for, a year and not realize till it's far too late that you have something that's misprinted in a way that you can't actually use it.
So, as you may know, we really like the Arkham Horror games and all the mythos and themes that go along with those. All those games, all the Arkham Horror games have a great connection between the theme of the game and the gameplay. This isn't an exception to that. They did a great... I wasn't sure how they're going to do it with a deck building game, but I think they did a really good job of incorporating the theme into the game.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this, like so many of these games, is really just oozing some unknowable substance with theme. It's a very narrative game. I mean, they really want you to read the cards and, read the agenda, read the storyline in the scenario book. I mean, it's not a ton of text. I don't want to make it sound like you have to sit down and read a book before you play. You don't, other than the rule book. You don't really have to. But there is a lot of flavor there, and I do think it helps immerse you more in what's going on. If you do read those things and take into account, you could play this game fully mechanically, I suppose. I would never choose to, but it is something that could be done. But the theme is definitely there if you want it, without a doubt. And one thing I will say about this too, you kind of have to mention that the Cthulhu mythos was invented by H.P. Lovecraft back in, I believe, the 1920s. And while he created something pretty neat, he himself was not a great dude. He was pretty racist in a lot of ways. I don't know that was particularly uncommon for the time, but does put a little bit of a taint on other things. And for me, the fact that he has been long since deceased and cannot make a dime off any of these properties, makes it not really bother me too much. I mean, a lot of people write or do other things in the Cthulhu mythos. It's pretty much like an open source thing now. And I really feel like Fantasy Flight has taken that and really made that chunk of it their own, so that you know these characters and you kind of know what they're about if you've played enough of these games. You've probably seen them before in something. And I really like that about it. I think they've really done something great with the foundation that H.P. Lovecraft built without incorporating some of the unfortunate elements that he included. Okay, so getting to final thoughts for this game, as far as card games go, this is a really deep one. There's a lot to explore here, and I think it is a lot of fun to just go into the scenarios and try to win, even just with the pre-made decks. I think that's a great way to learn the game, but I don't think I'd want to throw myself too seriously into it without building a deck, because I don't think the pre-made decks are great in terms of getting you through it on their own. That being said, I think building the decks is not really too difficult to do. Is one of the things that intimidated me about this game at first, is I thought it would be so many options that it would be difficult to create a good deck. But with really only 30 cards, at least for the characters in the base set, it's not actually too hard to get some stuff that is going to work well for you and see where different cards might interact in a way that are going to help you through some of these difficult scenarios. And despite my misgivings or concerns about doing the deck building that I had initially, I'm finding that I really love crafting these decks. It's really a lot of fun to do. It like tickles my brain in like this perfect way. And I don't mean just one tickle. I mean like 10 tickles. It's really fantastic to build a deck and then see it in action. And when it works, it's spectacular. And then when it doesn't, it just makes me want to be like, okay, what can I do in the future to make a deck like this work? And I love going through and leveling up your character between scenarios, adding cards and removing some that maybe you decided weren't for you, or that you just have a better version of now. Really like the character progression in that. I mean, the scenario in this box is only, or the campaign in this box is only 3 scenarios long, but I think the ones that are out there are quite a bit longer. The other thing that I like about this new production they've done of it is it used to be, I believe, that when you wanted to like get one of their expansion campaigns, it was in a lot of little sets. So you'd have like one pack that was, I believe, like just like one scenario or maybe 2. I never ended up buying them because I was like, I don't want to track all these dang things down. It's ridiculous. And I didn't want to have to buy all these individual characters. So what they've done now is they're releasing entire campaigns just in like one box, and then they'll have another box that they sell that has like 5 or 6 characters that you can add in as well, and more cards that you can add for building decks with any of the characters, which is pretty neat. And I think it's ultimately quite a bit cheaper too, because those individual decks, I think, the character ones would go for, 18 to 20 bucks for like one character's starter deck, but now they sell 5 and it's like 35 or 40. So big difference, and I really like how they did it because it's much less of a pain to track down everything you need to get into a scenario. I'm saying all this because I'm excited to do more of these scenarios and to see more cards. They've done it. They figured out how to separate me from my money, because I want to try finding cards that are not just in the set and put them into decks and see how they work. They're very crafty. God, I could have said Lovecrafty. That would have been silly. Anyway. But they know how to get into your brain and get you to want to buy more cards and battle through more of these very difficult missions. And that's what I want to do. I like this game enough that I'm going to give it a 9, a very solid 9. You might have seen our top 50 games of all time videos, in which case you know that the Arkham Horror board game was my number 1 of all time. Now, I do hate that they had to name this Arkham Horror the Card Game when there's Arkham Horror the Board Game, but every other Arkham game in the Arkham Files has a different name. Why did they do that? Because now no one knows what you're talking about unless you say the board game or the card game. Nitpick, but it does make you have to compare the two. So if you were just going to buy the base boxes, I think you get a lot more bang for your buck out of the board game box. You know, there's several scenarios in there. The game plays pretty long. There's a lot more stuff, I feel like, in that box than there is in this one. But this one is the game that cries out more for expanding and trying different things and actually really building your character up. So right now, having just played out of this set, it doesn't quite match up to the Arkham Horror board game to me. But it's close. And as I play more of these scenarios, I could easily see this growing unless I just decide I hate these scenarios, which who knows? I mean, it could turn me sour against it, but I've heard people say that this is not like the best scenario out there, the one that's in the box, even though I enjoyed it fine. So I'm excited to see what's out there and see if this could actually knock the Arkham Horror board game off its throne as the #1 spot on my list. But we will see. Now, I'm very curious because we haven't talked about what we think about this game, and I have a feeling that we may not see eye to eye on this. So, what do you think about Arkham Horror the Card Game?
So for me, you know, if you saw our top 50 games, I had a lot of Cthulhu, Mystos themed games in my top 50. I want to say there was like 10 of them. So there was a lot. I really enjoy the Cthulhu, Mystos, Lovecraft theme games. I really like deck builders. I really want to like this game. There's just something there that's not connecting with me. I don't know, maybe trying a different scenario. I think it's more the mechanics. The whole time we're playing this, like, I'm comparing it to some of our other game Cthulhu games, especially Arkham Horror the board game. And for me, if I'm picking 10 out of 10, I'm picking the board game over the card game. For me, I'm going to give it a 5, maybe a 6 if I, it might bump up a little bit, but there's just something there that's not quite connecting with me. And like I said, for as many Arkham Cthulhu themed games that we have, there's so many more that I would rather be playing.
Did I mention that you can play this solo? You can. That may come in handy. We'll see. I do hope that you'll try at least a couple other scenarios or campaign things. See if they change your mind at all. I don't know if they will. Maybe they'll make it worse, like I said. You never can tell, but we'll see what's out there. We'll maybe loop around and see if any of those other things change your mind on another day or change my mind on another day. It could happen either way. So, with all that being said, I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it helpful to you. If you have, please hit like and subscribe and click the little bell icon so you can know about the next time we put out a video. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you all around the table again at All Games New and Old.
Bye.
Oops. So if you investigate, you will then, if you, Jesus. So that kind of helps. So that kind of helped. What am I trying to freaking say?
I don't know.
Okay.
If you're familiar with any of the Arkham Horror games from Final Fantasy, or
Fantasy Light. With all that being said, thanks. Oh, horrible. Seriously, the worst thing I've ever done. Oh my god. Slightly ashamed of what I just did. So smoky. If you liked that video, you have no idea how much I respect your wise and intelligent opinion. And you might like this video.
Or this one.
Either way, if you want to go ahead and click this button to subscribe, we'd really appreciate it.
We'll see you around the table.
Bye.
Bye.